My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
This is Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show here at WABC Radio. WABC, making AM radio great again. For the next 2 hours, we're going to talk news, politics, and, well, I'm going to lay down the stone cold truth. You, of course, can find us at 770 on the AM dial, or if you're from out of town, you're not in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area where I grew up, you can find us at WABCradio.com. Better yet, I recommend that you download the 77 WABC radio app to your cell phone. You can find it in the App Store. That way you won't miss any of the all-star lineup that we have here at WABC Radio. I'm talking about Sid Rosenberg in the mornings, Larry Kudlow, the apostle of economic growth, the man who quarterbacked the turbocharging of the American economy under President Donald Trump. Frank Morano, if you're a night owl, on the other side of midnight. That's offbeat programming you're not going to want to miss. Rita Cosby at 10 o'clock in the evenings, weeknights. She is one of the most experienced, incisive radio journalists in American history. It is must listening. Cindy Adams, the undisputed queen of gossip. Dominic Carter, who always has his finger on the pulse of New York. America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, always brings it with style. Not to mention his son, Andrew Giuliani. You just heard him. Love Andrew Giuliani. And of course, the crown jewel, the Katz and Cosby Show, 5 o'clock weekdays, 8 o'clock on Sunday mornings, reviewing the biggest stories in the news, and on Sunday, setting the table for your Sunday. Be sure you go and download the WABC 77 News app, and do it now. Well, the big Fox debate is scheduled for August 23rd. The Republican candidates are supposed to gather in Milwaukee, but the question really is, will the frontrunner show up? In other words, can there be a debate if Donald Trump doesn't show? He said this week that he's made a decision, but he's not ready to announce it. I happen to know that Suzanne Scott and Jay Wallace, executives at Fox, made the pilgrimage to the President's Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey, to make the case why the president should show up. I also know that Republican National Chairwoman Ronna Romney has been lobbying the president to make the scene. I'm not sure what he's going to do, but I'll tell you what I told him. In 1960, Vice President Richard Nixon, who had served for 8 years, had a narrow lead over the much lesser known Senator John F. Kennedy. John Kennedy then challenged Richard Nixon to a series of 4 televised debates. President Dwight Eisenhower, New York Governor Tom Dewey, who had been the Republican nominee for president in 1944 and 1948, and Len Hall, a New Yorker, Nixon's campaign manager, chairman of the Republican National Committee, all advised Nixon against debating the lesser-known John F. Kennedy. Nixon assured them that there was no way he was going to debate. They were all shocked to pick up the newspaper the next day to learn that Nixon had accepted all 4 debates. Things quickly went downhill from there. Nixon bumped his knee on a car door while campaigning in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. That rapidly developed into a staph infection, and Nixon had to be hospitalized and actually was in the hospital for 2 solid weeks after Labor Day in the skin-tight 1960 election. Nixon came zooming out of the hospital. He had made a foolish pledge at the Republican National Convention in Chicago to visit all 50 states. Nixon was 15 pounds underweight, still on antibiotics, still running a fever. Nonetheless, he made 5 stops in states for campaign rallies on his way to Chicago. He showed up in Chicago thoroughly and completely exhausted. Nixon then repaired to his hotel room to cram for the debate. Meanwhile, John F. Kennedy showed up in Chicago and was sunning himself on the hotel roof with 2 gorgeous hookers. When the lighting check came for the debate, it's kind of like the weigh-in in a prize fight, they say Nixon's face looked almost as gray as his suit. Nixon overheard the legendary television producer Don Hewitt say, "Senator Kennedy, will you be requiring makeup for tonight's debate?" "No," Kennedy said, "no makeup for me." It's not surprising. The famous author Teddy White said that Kennedy looked like a bronzed god. Nixon overheard this, and then when Hewitt said to Vice President Nixon, "Mr. Vice President, will you be requiring makeup for tonight's debate?" No, Nixon said, "no makeup for me." Whereupon John Kennedy repaired to his dressing room, where his own personal makeup man was flown in from New York to make him up. Well, Nixon's advisors convinced him that he could not go out and face Kennedy looking the way he did. He still refused to be made up, but he did agree to use a product called Lazy Shave, which is a powder that is used to conceal your 5 o'clock shadow. The advance men for John F. Kennedy very cleverly turned the air conditioning in the Chicago television station off. The debate began, and Nixon was shocked when John Kennedy came at him not from the left, but from the right. America needed a defense buildup, Kennedy argued, that Eisenhower and Kennedy had allowed America's military might to atrophy in their 8 years. Eisenhower was opposed to a defense buildup, and Vice President Nixon was boxed in to the Eisenhower policy. Eisenhower and Nixon weren't doing enough to remove Fidel Castro from Cuba. Kennedy and Nixon both knew that there was a secret classified Bay of Pigs invasion plan on the table, but Nixon could not respond that they were indeed moving against Castro. Lastly, they haggled over Quemoy and Matsu, 2 small islands off the coast of China that nationalist and communist China were fighting over. Nixon began to sweat profusely, and as he sweat, the lazy shave on his face began to run. He literally melted down on national television. Those who heard the debate on radio thought Nixon had won, but those who saw the debate on television overwhelmingly said John F. Kennedy had scored. Nixon's own mother, Nixon's Hannah Milhouse Nixon, called the vice president's longtime assistant, Rosemary Woods, to say, "Is Richard unwell?" But it was Chicago Mayor Daley, who watched the debate on TV with a group of his party chieftains, who said, "Hell, Nixon's isn't dead yet, but they've already embalmed him." The bottom line of this is that disastrous debate decision cost Richard Nixon the presidency. Therefore, my advice to President Trump has been pretty simple. I'm not saying he should never debate. I'm not saying that at all. But from what I can tell, Trump has nothing to gain and everything to lose. With a 35 to 40 point lead in the Republican field, why should he give any of these challengers, almost all of whom are in near single digits, an opportunity, an open shot? Chris Christie is openly talking on CNN about hard charging the president into debate. Chris Christie's at 2% of the vote. 8% of New Jersey voters think he did a good job as governor. Why would you give that guy an open shot? If President Trump has any qualms whatsoever, he should think about that great that interview with Bret Baier a couple of weeks ago, in which every single question was hostile. I think the president did very well, but there were no friendly questions. There can be no debate if the frontrunner chooses not to show up, and I don't think he will. What will happen then? Well, I predict that all the other will turn on the guy who's ahead of them, and that very narrowly would be Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Vivek Ramaswamy, who's had a bit of a rally in the polls lately and who's really an unabashed Trump defender, I think will play the role of Trump in this debate and will actually answer any of the attacks on Trump by any of the other candidates. I think Trump himself summed this up when he said, "I think I'll sit back and watch the debate, considering it an audition for those who would like to be a vice president." Will we ever see a Joe Biden-Robert F. Kennedy debate? That would be interesting. Hank Sheinkoff, the legendary Democratic political strategist, joins us today on the Roger Stone Show to take a look at that, as well as looking at state and local politics. There are also rumblings among progressives about finding a candidate to challenge Eric Adams. I certainly want to ask Hank Sheinkoff about that. Also joining us is former Governor Rod Blagojevich of Illinois. He too was a target of a weaponized judicial system that ended his political career. He recently told Fox Television that he had seen real parallels between his own prosecution and what's going on now in the District of Columbia, also in a Miami courtroom, in the weaponized judiciary system attacks on Donald Trump. We're going to talk to Rod Blagojevich. By the way, I haven't known Rod Blagojevich very long, but I see why they had to stop this guy. He would have been president himself. He is among the most talented political figures I've ever met. Today's show actually features more Democrats than Republicans, if anybody has any doubts about our bipartisanship here on the Roger Stone Show. And then, of course, lastly, Kimberly Guilfoyle will join us. You remember her as an anchor at Fox News, but now she hosts her own The Kimberly Guilfoyle Show on Rumble. My most recent interview with her on her show, as of last night, had 236,000 downloads. She has definitely emerged as one of the president's staunchest defenders, and she will join us here. This is the Roger Stone Show. It's at WABC on the 770 AM dial. If you are not in the sound of my voice, then I urge you to go to WABCradio.com, where you'll be able to listen to the show in real time. You'll also be able to listen to it later, but the best thing to do is to download the WABC radio app to your phone. That way you won't miss any of the pro lineup here at WABC. While you're at it, I urge you to stop by stonezone.com. That way you can download my daily podcast at stonezone.live. You can also listen once again to these WABC Sunday broadcasts. Previous guests have included President Donald Trump, General Michael Flynn, country and western superstar John Rich, New York City's greatest mayor Rudy Giuliani, and many others. You can find those by either going to the WABC app or you can find them by going to stonezone.com. This past week in New York City, a federal judge denied a motion by the city of New York to throw out a lawsuit filed by former New York City police officer Salvatore Greco. Sal Greco is a 14-year veteran of the New York City Police Department, often assigned the graveyard shift in some of the most dangerous precincts in the city. He has an unblemished record of service to the people of New York. In fact, at one time he held the record for the most DUI arrests. But Sal Greco was fired because he violated a seldom employed regulation of the New York City Police Department that said he cannot consort with or associate with people who can reasonably be expected to engage in crime. That would be me. You see, Sal Greco and I became friends when my wife and I were going through the 2-year unmitigated hell of the witch hunt conducted by Robert Mueller. And Sal Greco lost his pension, his livelihood, but probably more than all of that, he lost his good name. As the New York Daily News reported this past week, Salvatore Greco filed a lawsuit. The city of New York moved to dismiss that lawsuit. Greco is arguing that he was arbitrarily fired from the New York City Police Department because of his friendship with me, but that was not inconsistent with their application of the regulation. Well, the New Yorker had a piece this week that said that Mayor Eric Adams provided private security for Mike Tyson. He's a convicted felon. His own biography tells us that he provided private security for the Reverend Louis Farrakhan, another convicted felon. It should be noted that it is perfectly permissible for a New York City police officer, at the time Eric Adams was a police captain, to provide private security on their off-duty hours. I think you have to get it approved by the department first. But why, when he was investigated for violating this exact same regulation, they docked Eric Adams, then a New York police officer, 5 days' pay. Where in the case of Sal Greco, they not only took away his pension, took away his job, but today he does not have a good conduct letter. Without a good conduct letter, Sal Greco can't get a job as a police officer in any other jurisdiction. So he sued. The city of New York made a motion to dismiss. That was rejected by the federal judge. Then they made a second motion to dismiss that was almost identical to the first motion to dismiss. And now the judge has dismissed the city of New York from the lawsuit, but said that Officer Greco can bring a lawsuit against the individuals involved in his firing. It is the custom in these situations, I'm not a lawyer, but lawyers have told me this, that the city of New York would indemnify those who terminated Sal Greco. All he's asking for is equal protection under the law. This is The Roger Stone Show on WABC. Stick with us here. We've got a great lineup. You're going to want to hear Hank Sheinkoff, legendary Democratic political consultant, former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, and Kimberly Guilfoyle, formerly of Fox News, now at the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show, are all on deck. Also in the news, current Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced the reboot of his campaign. I don't think a reboot is going to solve his problems, quite candidly. He actually fired his campaign manager and got a new one. I think the problem there is the candidate. I think the problem there is the candidate himself. You see, they have spent millions of dollars. One of the absolute keys to running a successful presidential campaign is understanding how to spend your money. By my calculations, based on the fourth quarter filing of Ron DeSantis's political campaign, his presidential campaign, he has an extraordinary monthly burn rate of almost $450,000 a week. The governor and his wife insist on flying by private jet everywhere. When I worked for Ronald Reagan in the 1976 campaign, and our campaign ran low on money, well, Governor Reagan and his wife flew commercial to our campaign events. And in fact, the campaign received an awful lot of positive media around the fact that he was right down there with the people. He didn't require a private jet. I think the problem here is somewhat greater. There's a famous story about the man who owned a dog food company, and he couldn't get any sales. He wasn't able to sell his dog food, couldn't get any large orders. Ultimately, he went bust. Well, they asked him, why did your company go broke? He said, well, the problem was simple. The dogs just didn't like the stuff. Therein, I think, lies the problem. Governor DeSantis lacks a certain likability, a certain charisma that I think you need to be a successful president in the television age. And we still are in the television age because videos on the internet always get more traction than the printed word. Likability is crucial. That's why the DeSantis campaign has put Ron's far more telegenic and far more congenial wife out on the campaign trail. But in all honesty, Donald Trump so completely fills the vacuum of discussion in the Republican Party, and counterintuitively, with the recent indictments in D.C. And the ongoing prospects of a new indictment in Georgia, where I've read the transcript of the very controversial phone call between the Secretary of State and Donald Trump. No, he didn't ask the Secretary of State to go out and find 11,870 votes. He told them that he had already inadvertently, accidentally counted that large number of illegal votes, 5,222 being convicted felons, another 1,200 being deceased, and so on. And once you remove them from the totals, Georgia would have been won by Trump. This is yet another politicized prosecution by a George Soros-funded prosecutor. Anyway, thanks for tuning in to the Roger Stone Show here at WABC. When we're finished at 5, hang on for Ernie Anastos, and then at 6 o'clock, it's my good friend Joe Piscopo with Sundays with Sinatra. As my favorite comedian, Jackie Gleason, used to say, away we go.
How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
This episode is brought to you by Chevrolet. When you have 4 new tires, every drive feels fresh. Right now, buy 3 select tires and get 1 for just $1 during the Chevrolet Certified Service Fresh Start Tire event. Visit Chevrolet.com/service offers or see dealer for full details. At participating U.S. GM dealers only, highest or equal value tire will be $1. Offer ends 5/31/2025. Not available with other offers.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show at WABC Radio. You can find us at 770 on the AM dial, or if you're out of town, we are streaming worldwide on WABCRadio.com. Joining me now is one of the most talented political figures I have ever met. I now understand why he was attacked by a weaponized judiciary system in an extraordinarily political prosecution, because Rod Blagojevich, the 40th governor of Illinois, would have been president otherwise. He did serve as governor of Illinois from 2003 to 2009. He was in the U.S. House of Representatives as a congressman from 1997 to 2003. He is, I must note, a convicted felon like myself, but hey, this is the Roger Stone Show. If you're indicted, you're invited. Specifically, he was convicted of public corruption for allegedly selling the U.S. Senate seat that was being vacated by Barack Obama, which he, as the governor of Illinois, had the authority to appoint someone to. He served 8 years after a very controversial conviction, only to ultimately have his sentence commuted by President Donald Trump in 2020. When Rod Blagojevich and I were at Mar-a-Lago for dinner one night, seated at the same table, the president was, as he often does, spinning the tunes from his laptop in the dining room, acting like a DJ. He sent somebody over to our table to ask us what we wanted to hear, and it was Rod Blagojevich who recommended Jailhouse Rock. Rod Blagojevich, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Thanks for having me, Roger. Let me quote somebody that we both admire historically, someone you knew, and that's President Nixon. I am not a crook. I didn't break a law, cross the line, or take a penny. It was a political hit that they did to me. Corrupt, weaponized prosecutors were able successfully to do at the AAA level to a Democrat governor what they're now doing to President Trump, a Republican president, leading candidate for president at the major league level. And our country is in trouble, Roger. I suspect we'll probably talk about that. I believe this is the greatest constitutional crisis we face in America since the Civil War. And the stakes are high, and I think anybody and everybody who loves our country, cherishes freedom, believes in the right of the people to self-government, whether you're a Republican or like me, a Democrat, Trumpocrat like me, whatever your political persuasion, we should all be against this, because what's at stake is those things and the rule of law. But thanks for having me, Roger. You're quite an interesting figure, and it's been a real pleasure to get to know you since I've come home from prison.
Well, Rod, I have studied your case very extensively. It appears to me that your real transgression is refusing an order by President-elect, or maybe he was president by then, Barack Obama, to appoint Valerie Jarrett to the vacated U.S. Senate seat. But as I understand it, your conviction centered around a phone conversation in which the prosecutors alleged that you were trying to sell the seat, but they would never play that recording in a courtroom to let a jury or the American people hear what you actually said.
Well, there's so many parallels to what they did to me and what they're doing and trying to do to President Trump. And one of them is covering up evidence and that's exculpatory, that shows innocence, covering up evidence that shows the full story of things, putting gag orders on you, which is what the special counsel Jack Smith is talking about doing to President Trump. In other words, undermining free speech, thwarting, shutting down free speech. But no, the whole thing began. My troubles began right after Barack Obama was elected president. It was election night in Chicago. Political figures and high officials, and I was one, the governor of Illinois at the time. First governor, incidentally. Roger, don't throw me off your show, but the first one to endorse Obama for president. And I was approached backstage that night. It was historic. First, black president elected in our history at Grand Park in Chicago. Maybe 500,000 people were there. Maybe not quite that. Sometimes they inflate the numbers, but it was magical. And I was approached by a labor boss who worked with both Obama and me politically over the years. And he said that, quote unquote, Barack called me last night, let me come and talk to you. He's interested in you appointing Valerie Jarrett to the Senate. What is it that you want? Can I call you tomorrow and set up an appointment? I said, of course, see me. And so the conversations began the next morning with my top staff. I told them, that Obama had sent this guy and that we should think about what we might be able to get. Now, these are political things, not criminal things, horse trading. And that's what they criminalized in my case. And then after I was in prison for nearly 5 years, the appellate court eventually got to actually issue its opinion, and they reversed that case. The centerpiece of their case was a lie from the very beginning. But Winston Churchill said a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to put its pants on. And, and that prosecutor arrested me at 6 o'clock in the morning, a sitting governor with SWAT teams around my house. It was, frankly, you should have, who'd have thought, Roger, years later they do the same thing to you. He, at the time when he had me in custody, announced to the world that that's what I was trying to do. He's just a big liar and a corrupt guy. And, the rest is history. I went through that ordeal. I would never give in, and I still won't. And because it's much larger than just me being a governor or even President Trump being a president. It truly is about our Constitution, the rule of law, and free elections.
Here's what you said on Twitter just the other day. Consider the endless persecution Trump has to face. Very hard. I ask, why would he put himself through that when he could just enjoy life and the things his great success has brought him? There's only one reason. It must be because he truly loves his country and he believes he can fix it and make it great. Now, you're a Democrat. You remain a Democrat. I'm a Republican, but we seem to agree on this particular point.
Yeah, you've been through it, Roger. I went through it. I spent 8 years in prison because I wouldn't give in. And because what they're doing is so wrong and so corrupt, you can't possibly give in. And in the case of President Trump, here's a guy who's lived, in so many ways, a perfect life in the sense that he had all the success financially that he'd won, international celebrity, all those things that go along with the glitz and glamour that Donald Trump used to enjoy before he got into politics. The TV show Celebrity Apprentice, which I was on, which he correctly fired me on. By the way, he's the only president in American history, Roger, Donald Trump is, to have fired and freed the same guy. Even Abraham Lincoln didn't do that. But I asked myself, why would he put himself through that? His whole life, 76, 77 years, he never was charged with a single crime, like you and like me, right? Now suddenly he becomes the president of the United States, and now suddenly he's facing, as a former president, 3 different criminal charges and likely going to get a 4th shortly, all by Democrats, so obviously political. But why would a guy put himself through that? And his family, when he could enjoy the life that he knew and that life that is so wonderful and not have to be threatened with the possibility of facing prison time? It can only mean that he loves America so much, and it can only mean that he sees just how terribly wrong all of this is. And it can only mean that he feels like if he's successful this time around, and I believe he will be, notwithstanding what they're doing to him, that he's going to get in there and he's going to clean things up, shake things up. I think he learned a lot after the first term. I think he learned something about government and politics that he didn't really understand as a businessman, and that is that so many of these partisan politicians in both parties but I'll speak of my own party, the Democrats, Pelosi and others, Schumer. They had no interest in working with him to get anything done for the people. And I think he made a mistake thinking that they would make deals, political deals, and that you could advance the common good and the general welfare by doing that, by working, practically and, give and take in the process, which is how democracy is supposed to work. But instead, he walked into a system and a way of doing business now where, the Democrat leaders in Washington were determined to do nothing but try to stop him from doing anything and destroy him along the way. They've taken politics to a whole new ugly level. And I do believe President Trump is enduring and suffering and persevering through all of this because he truly loves America and is determined to try to change it, fix it, and eventually make it great again. And I marvel at his strength, Roger, because I know how hard this is when you go through something like that. It's amazing and it's inspiring. And he's a strong man. He's a strong leader, and that's what our country needs now.
It really is quite extraordinary. Not only did I travel with him a couple days a few weeks ago, we went to Iowa and Las Vegas and then California and then back to New Jersey, but I actually spoke to him this morning. The man's strength really amazes me. I mean, look, I worked for Richard Nixon. I worked for Senator Bob Dole. Very, very tough guys. Bob Dole was a true World War II hero. He was hit by a shell in Italy. He was told that he would never walk again. He was told that he would never have the use of his hands or his arms again. He was told that he would be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, that he would never be able to feed himself, never be able to button his own shirt, dress himself. He basically fought back from the brink of that handicap through relentless exercise and therapy. He had a withered arm, which he concealed in a very successful political career by always having a pen or a rolled piece of paper in his right hand. He was truly one of the greatest men of the 20th century, but it was in an age of politics where there was a greater, congeniality. Republicans and Democrats worked together to get things done. I saw Robert Kennedy talking about this the other day in an extraordinary interview where he said that his uncle Ted Kennedy got more legislation passed on a bipartisan basis than any U.S. senator in the history of the country, and that his Uncle Ted would often bring Republican senators home to the Kennedy family compound in Hyannisport, Massachusetts for the weekends. Bobby Kennedy said that when he was very young, Senator Orrin Hatch from Utah, a rock-ribbed conservative, came to spend the weekend with Ted Kennedy, and that he thought Orrin Hatch was Darth Vader at that point. He was a radical environmentalist at the time, but that his Uncle Ted understood that civility, congeniality, mutual respect, honest, open debate could actually get things done for the people. That is the politics that I remember. You served in the House. What was it like when you were a congressman?
Well, I was there from 1997 until January of 2003 when I was then sworn in as governor of Illinois. So there's 6 years, 3 terms. And when I first got there, Newt Gingrich was a Republican Speaker of the House. And then after him, Hastert, was the years of Bill Clinton had been impeached for the Monica Lewinsky stuff. And it was probably it was so much more collegial back then than it is now, certainly. People weren't out to, put the other side into jail or prison. Yeah, sure, the other side was trying to beat you in elections. The Democrats were trying to win the majority over the Republicans and vice versa. There was a lot of gridlock and politically motivated. And that was a little bit frustrating for me because I go to these Democrat caucuses and you never hear, Democratic congressmen or women in the morning. We have these meetings at 9:30. Talk about, hey, how can we work with the Republicans to get something done? It was always, how do we stop them from doing stuff? And that was frustrating. And so it was among the reasons why I decided to run for governor, because you can actually try to do stuff because you're the executive. But is frustrating as some of that was, and I think the seeds were planted where, the politics of personal destruction, and this was directed at Clinton, and I understand a lot of people don't like Clinton and all that, and what he did with Monica Lewinsky was totally awful and rotten, but not impeachable. And I think that set the stage for the development of this new kind of politics that's gotten worse. I think it even started back during the Watergate times with Nixon. And, the one side does it, then the other side gets power, and they do it, and then it grows. And now we got what we have, which I believe is, as I said before, we're at a point in our history. It's a central time of our history, a defining moment, really. And whether or not this is the politics we're going to continue with, which is third world, Russian, Soviet-style type politics, or whether we're going to have the people have more of a voice. But to your point about whether or not, when I was in Congress, it was a lot more bipartisan, I would say not so much bipartisan, but there were moments when the shouting would stop. There were moments when the hyper-partisanship would be put on the back burner, and you can actually make deals and get things done. And Clinton, in spite of his foibles, was able to put aside those personal attacks that went his way to find common ground, even with Gingrich and with the Republican leaders. And the Republican leaders were willing to find common ground with him to move certain things forward. And in spite of the difficulties they had back then, you'll remember, Roger, the economy was flourishing. Things were pretty good in America. And Democrats necessarily didn't hate Republicans and vice versa. So very different. Yet I look back on it now and I can see how the seeds were planted back then and how those very seeds now are blooming, unfortunately, what's being done to Trump. And I say this about Trump real quick, Roger, and you know the business a lot better than I do. He's an outsider who's truly keeping his promises to the people. This is why they want to destroy him. And when I say they, I don't mean just the Democrats. I mean those corporate country club, Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, the Bush family type Republicans who join the Democrats in Washington, and they fight against each other over certain things, but they stay within the margins. When you got a true outsider like Trump, who's actually trying to keep his promises to the people who elected him, and then he actually tries to do it, that's where they feel threatened, because they're all lunching up on that system over there. I call it the political industrial complex. Lobbyists and staffers, presidents come and go, members of Congress come and go, or they stay there and become lobbyists, and these people are getting rich, the George Conways of the world, if you know who I'm talking about. And Trump is a threat to that. And he truly meant what he said, and he was keeping his promises. And this is why they've come at him so hard, and this is why they're so determined from keeping him from winning. And they know that if he wins now, after everything they've done, there's going to be a tremendous amount of change in Washington, and hopefully starting with the Department of Justice, because that is this new political force now that was never envisioned or contemplated by our founding fathers. So that's a long answer. I'm sorry for these long answers, Roger, but times are very different now than they were when I was in Congress, and the stakes are high, and I would encourage all of your listeners to vote for President Trump.
If you are tuning in, folks, this is the Roger Stone Show. I'm on here with former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich. So, Rod, let me ask you a difficult question. How were you treated when you were in the big house? I mean, we had former Congressman Chris Collins on the show a couple weeks ago. Collins served in hard time in an upstate New York prison. He told me that he made lifelong friends there, that he helped counsel people on how they could start a business when they got out, how they could turn their lives around. He's still in touch with, and I think has provided assistance to some of the men that he was incarcerated with. How were you treated inside the joint?
Yeah, well, I did 8 years, and I'm the only governor to have been put in the higher security prison for the first 32 months. I was in a prison that's actually like the prisons you see on television. Most governors, and most of the time that I did in prison was at what's called the prison camps, where it's still prison, but you're not behind bars and there aren't fences. But for the first 2.5 years, that's where I was, because if you're given more than a 10-year sentence, the law requires that you have to be put behind what the inmates call the razor wire. And that's where I was. And so there were, gangbangers and, Crips and Bloods and Sureños and Norteños, Tejanos, Aryan Nation gangs, Pacific Islander gangs, Native American gangs. There were 950 guys there that were men that were committed murder, bank robbers, 2% white collar, a lot of sex offenders, and one governor. And that was me. I have to say, Roger, I was treated very well by my colleagues there in the higher prison and then later on in camp. Now, you're there for 8 years. You're going to have conflict with some guys. You want the window open. He wants it closed, stuff like that. There are going to be some guys who just don't like you. But I got to say, by and large, I was treated very well. And just like that congressman, yeah, I have friends to this day that I made there that I'm in touch with, some that I'm helping, just like the congressman did. You know, one thing I had going for me, which is the two things I had going for me when I walked into prison, was they covered my entrance into prison. The media did live on television. They had these helicopters following me from my house to the airport at O'Hare in Chicago. And then when I landed in Denver, because I was in prison in Colorado, they were there waiting for me, and they filmed me walking right in, and the cameramen and followed me the whole way. It was like I was a mini O.J. Simpson in the white Bronco. That's how they treated me. And these guys are sitting in prison, and they're watching all of this on TV live. And then moments later, I walk in. So I had a certain, level of celebrity among inmates, which gives you a certain, kind of something that makes them apt to be respectful.
Cred.
But the real street cred, Roger, comes when you walk in and they realize this guy got a 14-year prison sentence. He didn't tell on anybody. He's not a snitch. And in that prison world, when you're not a snitch, that's a badge of honor. And so they really treated me with really high respect when I first got there. Most of them, not all of them, most of them. And at that time, Roger, my life, I left my little girls back at home, and my little Annie was 8 years old. She would be 17 when I come home. My daughter and my wife, Patty. And, when you go through something like that, and you've been persecuted and framed by these lying, wicked people. You've got sadness and heartache and longing for home, as well as bitterness, anger, and disillusionment. You're feeling all those things. And you got a long journey ahead, which I had, which is 14 years to do. You can't even see the light at the flicker of a light at the end of the tunnel. You have so long to go. You got to be strong because you love your children. You can't give in to these corrupt people. So you got to endure and survive. But at the same time, I want to say a bad word, but you're feeling like, terrible. And the last thing that I feared and didn't at all was whether some inmate wanted to screw around with me. It didn't bother me the least bit. I feared nothing. I've been so, beat up that if someone wanted to do something, it didn't, it was God's will. But anyway, that's another long answer. But no, mostly pretty good. And I learned a lot in that system. And I learned a lot about how broken the criminal justice system is, and how not only broken, can't be trusted, how racist it is, but we've now seen how weaponized it's become. And a lot of these FBI agents, and I hope that still like to think most of them are good guys, and most of these U.S. attorneys are good people. I have to believe that still, I hope. But I think many of them have adopted, they've actually morphed into the very people they've been chasing. Notwithstanding, my friendships with those colleagues I had in prison, most of those guys, almost all of those guys, were truly criminals. And they live their lives outside of the law. And you can see how they live in prison. You can see how it's cops and robbers, basically. It's the good guy, the cops against them. And I think a lot of these prosecutors have picked up the ways of criminals and have now applied that with the power they have. And that's why this Jack Smith is such a blatant liar. And in an indictment against Trump, he omits purposely the very thing Trump said on January the 6th, which is, quote unquote, peacefully and patriotically have your voices heard. Now, that's a fraud on the court, and yet these people get away with it.
Yeah, it appears to me that it is an egregious crime to question the outcome, the anomalies, the irregularities in a national election, for which you should be incarcerated if you're Donald Trump, but not if you are Kamala Harris or Nancy Pelosi. Or Congressman Jerry Nadler, or Congressman Jamie Raskin, or Senator Amy Klobuchar, or DNC Chairman and future Governor Terry McAuliffe, or Adam Schiff. All of those people questioned the 2000 election, questioned the 2016 election. Stacey Abrams questioned the 2018 election outcome. None of these people were charged criminally. Donald Trump exercised his First Amendment rights to question the outcome of an election, and for that, they want to incarcerate him. Is there any doubt in your mind that if Donald Trump were not running away with the field, 40 points ahead for the Republican nomination, and despite this unprecedented mainstream media attack on him, continues to lead Joe Biden in the national trial heats, as well as in every swing state, that they would be bringing these prosecutions? In other words, he's charged with election interference, but is this not itself actually the real election interference?
It's exactly what it is. It's an unprecedented way of interfering in the electoral process and trying to influence the outcome of the electoral process. And that's what's motivating these prosecutors. And I don't have direct evidence of, contacts between the Democratic National Committee and Jack Smith or the DA in New York, Bragg. But I'd be shocked if there weren't. And whether they're direct contacts or whether they're basically, sending signals publicly through certain things that they're saying or doing, I have no doubt in my mind that what is being done with these criminal prosecutions is in harmony with the political goals of the Democratic Party, my party, which is astounding to me that something like this could happen in the United States of America. I mean, this isn't Russia. This isn't a third world country, or is it? And again, had I not gone through that hard experience and long, hard experience I went through, I might be skeptical about this. One of the things I kick myself over, Roger, is when I had that power as governor, I feel like I was a great governor, did a lot of stuff for people, and fought the system like Trump did, and my own party as well as the other party. But mostly the trouble I had was with my own party, because my party at that time had controlled both legislative branches, but I was still able to push through stuff. But I look back on something I should have made a priority on, and that is to insist on the local school districts and pass maybe state legislation requiring that the curriculum in all the public schools throughout the state of Illinois is heavy on teaching civics and educating young people about how our government works, how our Constitution was formed, how it's supposed to operate. Because I think these Democrats are getting away with what they're doing, these prosecutors get away with what they're doing, because not enough people fully understand that this is so blatantly in violation of the Constitution and the rule of law, because at an early age, they just never really got schooled that way. So I'm kicking myself because I had that power. I should have done that. But no, if Trump wasn't ahead, they wouldn't be doing this. And that's the thing, which is amazing. So in other words, they're going to be driven by prosecuting someone for non-crimes based upon poll results. I mean, this is frightening for our democracy and for our country. And this is the seminal election that's going to decide whether we continue more down that road or whether we elect someone like President Trump to go out in there and reform the system and make it work the way it's supposed to work and the way it was designed to work.
All right, I'm afraid we have to end it there. I want to thank Governor Rod Blagojevich, the 40th governor of the state of Illinois, for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. Rod, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thank you, Roger. Appreciate you.
Jif peanut butter. It's that Jiffing good. It doesn't really need advertising. So instead, enjoy the calming sounds of the ocean. Jif. Ooh, it's that Jiffing good. Get your Jif at Jif.com.
Your gut affects everything, even your mood. So Ollie created 2 brand new products to take care of your insides. Ollie Big 10 Probiotic has 10 strains of probiotics, their most ever, to support a healthy gut microbiome, immune system, and stress response. And Ollie Super Good Superfoods delivers 15 superfoods in tasty gummy form. Find them at Ollie.com and exclusively at Walmart.
Ollie!
These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Shopping is hard.
I can never find anything in my size.
I don't even know my size.
I buy my clothes the same place I buy my groceries.
There's a better way. Make it easy with Stitch Fix. Just share your size, style, budget, and done. Your personal stylist sends pieces picked just for you.
That was easy.
Stitch Fix. Online personal styling for everyone. Free shipping and returns. No subscription required. Get started today at StitchFix.com.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show. We're at 770 on the AM dial. You can also always listen to us at WABCRadio.com, where we are streaming worldwide. Today is the rare show where I actually have more Democrats who are guests than Republicans, but we talk politics here on The Roger Stone Show, and I try to bring in guests who will reflect both sides of the aisle, both sides of the coin. Hank Sheinkopf is a legendary Democratic strategist. Hank Sheinkopf worked as a meat cutter and a police officer before being introduced to political strategy and consulting as a union organizer. His first political campaign was for former Democratic Congressman Herman Badillo in his unsuccessful race for mayor. But Hank Sheinkopf has gone on to an extraordinary career in which he has worked in over 700 political campaigns across the United States and actually around the world. Hank Sheinkopf was a key member of former Democratic President Bill Clinton's re-election team in 1992. He also worked for independent New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg and for the former president of the Dominican Republic, Leonel Fernandez. He has worked for a number of other entities, including Teamsters Local 237 and others. Hank Sheinkopf is a former contributor to CNN. His commentaries appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and Hank Sheinkopf has also worked as an instructor and a lecturer at NYU, Harvard University, Fordham University, and Brooklyn College. Hank Sheinkopf, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Well, I'm grateful for that introduction, and I'm kind of flattered by my own self, I have to tell you, but I'm mostly happy to be with you, Roger.
I really appreciate your being available because nobody understands national, state, and local politics like you do. So let's just jump right into it. Joe Biden. I would argue that the president's policies have brought the highest gasoline prices, record inflation, 76% increase in the cost of groceries. I have questions about the war in Ukraine and why we have no ongoing peace talks. Yet, in poll after poll, Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump seem to be locked in a near dead heat in most polls, with Trump holding a narrow lead. My reading of the country today is that the country is fairly evenly divided, which is, to me, somewhat surprising considering the distortion that I see, at least, in the general news coverage. So I guess a two-part question. How do you see this race unfolding? And does Joe Biden make it to the finish line, meaning will he be the Democratic nominee to begin with?
Well, good question. Second question first. No one gives up being the most powerful person in the world because they just decided to one day. It doesn't happen that way. The last person who did that voluntarily was not Richard Nixon, as you know, but Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1968. So that was 55 years ago. It doesn't happen. So Joe Biden leaving voluntarily doesn't seem likely. As to the outcome today, I believe Donald Trump, with the election held today, I believe Donald Trump would be the next president of the United States. I think the Republicans have an advantage from a message standpoint going into this contest with Trump as the nominee. He'll be seen, first of all, with these indictments as a victim, particularly in the heartland and in the South. He could pile up some real numbers because of all these indictments, which I think will backfire the way they've been done. Number one. Number two, the perfect ad would be to have Joe Biden looking like Joe Biden, and then cut to Kamala Harris with quotes from her, and then cut to Xi, the president of China. And you must remember that Americans do know that the Russians and the Chinese essentially invaded American sea space last week. And this is very, very serious. And you go to Xi, and then the screen goes to, who do you think is going to protect America? And you cut out. I mean, these are real issues that voters understand. And voters are not people who talk about taking the knee or whatever it is. They talk about service, communities, things, and basic bread and butter issues. I mean, it's just very difficult to see how Biden survives this right today. Now, we're talking, of course, in July of 2023, which is a long time away, because 5 minutes in politics is akin to 25 years in anything else. But that's my general sense of it, Roger.
You make a very good point about no president voluntarily relinquishing power. I read a terrific new book about the 1968 election by historian Luke Nichter. I'm about halfway through it. And he reveals that even though Lyndon Johnson dropped out shortly after the New Hampshire primary, he actually continued to consider jumping back into the race right up until the Democratic National Convention. He actually thought about helicopter landing into Chicago in 1968. Governor John Connally kept arguing that Lyndon Johnson could be drafted to return to the political wars. There was a massive fight over the platform on the issue of Vietnam, and right up until the last minute, LBJ seriously considered jumping back into that race. It is kind of interesting that just this past week, on August 8th, was the 49th anniversary of the resignation of Richard Nixon, the only man to resign the presidency. President Trump has often said to me, you know, Nixon should have stuck it out. Nixon should have fought. I think it's easy today in the internet age to lose sight of the fact that in 1974, you had a completely monolithic media. You had three major broadcast networks. You had a number of very influential news magazines, Time, Newsweek, Look, Life, and so on. You had really no national newspapers. You had very strong regional newspapers. The New York Times was not considered a national newspaper in 1968. Either was the Washington Post. So Nixon had no platform to avail himself some way to counterattack, some medium in which he could defend himself and launch a counteroffensive. So my question to you, Hank, is how has the internet changed American politics?
It has changed it radically in ways that we don't even understand yet. We used to be able to deal with papers. I mean, the press corps was as you've noted, monolithic, largely on the left. It's become now much more variegated. Talk shows don't have the value they used to have, only in so much as they can then be streamed on the internet and to targeted portions of the population. You can build a community online that has tremendous power, and you can force the press corps, what's left of it, or the traditional press corps, to cover the community you've created. This is very unusual, and the reporters can't set the agenda anymore. To understand that when it came to Nixon and the Watergate investigation, the rest, reporters set the agenda for the nation. It's not, you couldn't do that today. The politicians will kind of laugh them off. because they can get around them. It's called to put the computer on, create a message, email into a certain group, come back to them, figure out what the metrics are. You'll know them in 72 hours, 96 hours to the outside, who's getting the message and who's receptive, and then go hit them again until you build a community through their links that is extraordinarily large. So it's entirely different. We don't even television doesn't have the capacity. I mean, we used to think that you could burn something in with 350 to 500 gross rating points, meaning that anywhere from 3.5 to the 60% of a population in a particular area would see 3.5 to 5 impressions of an ad. It doesn't matter anymore because no one's watching. They're streaming. They're much more. They're able to control what they see, which was not the case in 1972, 3, 4, and 5 when Nixon met his political demise.
Interesting that the raid on Mar-a-Lago took place on the same day, August 8th, 49 years later. Just an interesting factoid. So the candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., to me, as a student of politics, I just find this extraordinarily interesting. I am obviously supporting my friend of 45 years, Donald Trump. I'm a supporter of his, but I am intrigued by the Kennedy candidacy for a couple of reasons. One, he's a Kennedy, and he still has the Kennedy magic. He is an incredibly compelling speaker. He's extraordinarily knowledgeable. He takes, yes, some very controversial positions, but he seems to be very adept at being able to defend those positions with government studies from foreign and U.S. sources. It's amazing to me how quick on his feet he is. Polling that I have looked at have shown that the peace and freedom issues, the economic issues, have a greater bearing both in the Democratic nominating process and at least right now in the presidential contest. You were part of the team who recognized in 1992 that it was the economy that was the driving issue in the upset, I would say, re-election of Bill Clinton. I based on everything I have seen, the discussion of vaccine safety and effectiveness is not propelling Kennedy's candidacy. It seems to me to be more the war and peace and breadbasket issues. Can Robert F. Kennedy, given the level of censorship that he is subjected to, can he get any traction?
Yes, he can, and it's an important moment in our history for a whole host of reasons. He is, I think, not in the same place on the political spectrum, but he's very much like Gene McCarthy was in 1968, if we're going to use means of analysis. From the outside, looking at issues differently, directed toward a younger portion of the electorate. But people forget that the same people that voted in many ways demographically for his father for president also voted for George Wallace and Jesse Jackson. That innate populism and a sense of unfairness that a large portion of the electorate feels is very much in place. It's a war wound. Those that serve rather than be served are angry. Those that build communities are angry at the chaos they see in front of them. The electorate is much more conservative than we think on most issues, excepting abortion. And Kennedy is going to be able to grab, I would guess today, as much as 25 to 30% of the Democratic Party electorate by showing up. Why? Because people want someone new. The data shows that. They want someone not of the baby boomer generation. The data shows that. They want someone who's more direct future arguments they face, which are they going to be able to have anything like the lifestyle that the baby boomer generation had? Are they going to be, Kennedy can talk about that stuff. The others can't because they're badly positioned.
But it seems to me that he is forced to use essentially the new media. It's an internet-based candidacy. Has there been enough of a shift in the way people get their political news to the internet for him to be able to get his message across? In other words, as you and I know, one of the most revolutionary changes in politics brought by the internet is that it in a very specific way, it brought the cost of running for public office down. If you wanted to run for Congress on Long Island, for example. And Long Island is in the New York City media market. New York City broadcast television, even at the lowest rate, which you would be entitled to as a federal candidate, is still exorbitantly expensive. New York City radio, the real stations that people listen to, WABC, for example, because we reach so many millions of people, advertising here is not inexpensive. You get what you pay for. So does this shift to the internet, which in his case is a necessary shift, can that reach enough voters for him to get traction?
Well, the Kennedy candidacy will be the great test of that. Look, stations, we know that quarterly viewing, and television viewership is defined by how many people view on the quarter hour, right? That's how we measure. Is way down. Streaming is up. Other forms of receiving visual media are up, but television is dying as we know it. Were that not the case, you wouldn't see the you wouldn't see the kind of increases in media purchasing costs that television is just going through. Why? They're trying to survive, and the corporations that bought stations and networks are trying to reap every dollar they can before the whole thing goes bust. It's only a matter of time before the networks don't matter. There'll be more combinations of networks. Are they important? They're important to people probably over 50, maybe even over 60. But they're not important in the same way as they once were when Walter Cronkite, Huntley and Brinkley, and I guess it would be, Robinson, was it Robinson? Yeah, controlled or were the most highly thought of people in the world because they were the anchor people. And every evening at 6 o'clock, you knew where America would be. Or as Johnson said, after Cronkite went to Vietnam and came back and had on his evening newscast said that the war was wrong. Johnson was quoted in the biographies as saying, "I've lost Cronkite, therefore I've lost America." Not the case. Television doesn't matter in the way it did. It matters to some, but not all. Therefore, Kennedy has an opportunity, if he can get around the crazy label, which is all over the internet. If he can combat that, he's got a chance not to win necessarily, but to certainly have an extraordinary impact and to change our politics forever.
Yeah, if I had $1 for every person on Twitter who has posted a one-time picture of me and Robert Kennedy and General Michael Flynn, because we all spoke at a conference together alleging that I urged him to get into the race, not true, that I'm advising his campaign, not true, that I'm supporting him, not true. I like the idea that as a Democrat, he wants to seal our southern border. I like the idea that as a Democrat, that he seems to have real skepticism about the war in Ukraine. I saw a great interview with him this morning on the internet, watched it on Twitter, where he pointed out that Putin and Zelensky were very close, had a Minsk agreement, would have been a peace agreement that would have stopped the killing, but that was scuttled by our U.S. State Department. So I think he is extraordinarily compelling, but it is very easy to distort who he is on the internet. I don't think he's radical at all. I think he's well within the progressive mainstream of the Democratic Party. He is pro-abortion rights. I happen to be pro-life. He is a strong believer in climate change. I'm a climate change skeptic. Maybe that's because I'm a conservative Republican and he is still a progressive Democrat. Yet sealing our borders in order to end the drug and crime epidemic in the country doesn't seem to me to be a right or left position. It just seems to be common sense. So the real question is, can they so vilify him? Can they so build a caricature of him that it really disables his candidacy?
They can, and that's the problem here. The same way that those working for him can use internet communications to build a candidacy in a very different way, the other side can do the same, and they can check the metrics almost instantly or within reason. I mean, we used to have to wait much longer to find out the real impacts of television ads. Now we know pretty quickly and for less money exactly what's going on. They need to be able to focus, that Kennedy campaign does, on very, very clear, defined geographic locales for, immediately off the top, it's Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. Their arguments in many ways are much more progressive as we would define them, i.e. sealing the border and protecting American labor, which is the underlying argument there. Whether true or not, it's a very labor union left idea. Okay, there's nothing unusual about that. His father and Gene McCarthy ran for office in 1968 on a pledge to effectively to end the war in Vietnam. Ending the war in Ukraine and American involvement is something to consider. The name, getting enough information online that uses the name as a means to communicate with the black people, Latinos particularly, who would remember or who will be reminded and educated about the La Raza in California that Cesar Chavez and the union organizers fought there to organize the farm workers, is a serious thing to do. I mean, there's paths for him. And it could change, I believe, American politics forever. We are in a very important and difficult and potentially dangerous period of time where the parties have completely broken down. Their values are upside down. And it's not clear whether people identify by party or by other devices. But what we do see is parties that are scrambling to find definition and not being very successful at it, but rather finding individuals to identify with. And that's the reason why the Republicans look in better shape than the Democrats do right now.
Now, Hank, you are an ordained rabbi. You're a man of God. I know that you prayed for me and my family when we were going through great distress. Have you examined these claims that Robert Kennedy is in some way anti-Semitic? And what is your conclusion?
I don't think he's anti-Semitic. I think that he doesn't understand how to speak in sound bites. And I think that that is a problem for a political candidate, even more so in the social media age, because what you say is more easily distorted. If he'd said what he said in a sound bite, as opposed to linking different groups, people wouldn't say he was an anti-Semite. And frankly, he is a strong supporter of the state of Israel, as any rational person would be who cares about America, not because we love Jews, but because we love not eating grass. Harry Truman in 1948 understood that if you lost Greece and Turkey and the Mediterranean basin to the communists, that we would be eating grass here and we would have enemies off the coast of New York. The people in government today, the AOCs and the other misread and ahistoricals, don't understand the value of that relationship, not because we love Jews, but because we love protecting America. Kennedy understands both those issues, and I think to label him an anti-Semite is both unfortunate and unfair.
It does not appear to be true to me based on everything that I have read. I was very surprised by the decision by the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security not to approve Secret Service protection for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In 1968, after his father was brutally murdered on the night of the 1968 California Democratic primary, which he won, Congress passed a law that allowed the government to provide Secret Service protection for any qualified presidential candidate who applied for it. It was not automatic, although President Johnson ordered protection for every candidate, both Republican and Democrat, running that year. The Secret Service Department used to be under the Treasury Department. When the government was reorganized and the Department of Homeland Security was founded, the Secret Service was moved under DHS. Given the two things, given the murder of John F. Kennedy while serving as president, given the horrific murder of Robert F. Kennedy Sr., U.S. Senator from New York, former Attorney General of the United States, and given the fact that many on the internet and in public discourse whip up hatred and disdain for Robert Kennedy, my fear is that this might fuel some madman, some insane person to either hurt or kill Robert Kennedy. I just find this decision shocking. Hank, your reaction?
I am shocked by the decision as well. I want to go back a moment, though, Roger. We forget that Sirhan Sirhan publicly said that he murdered Robert Kennedy because he was a support because of his support for Israel. I mean, to call the son an anti-Semite is patently idiotic. And as to protecting him, that's pure politics. We ought to provide protection. We spend extraordinary amounts of money on stupidity. Here is a clear case where a person with a name in a country where there are too many guns held by too many crazy people, where that is going on, that we ought to be able to protect him in the way we would any other candidate for public office. And it would be a disaster were anything to happen to him, and we have a responsibility to protect him. Simple.
So politics has changed radically. There have been an illustrious history of Republican governors in New York State. Andrew Cuomo left the governorship under very controversial circumstances, yet he continues to have, I think, in excess of $6 million in leftover campaign funds that he still controls. I noticed that he makes strategic appearances. I think I saw him at a very large synagogue in Long Island recently where he was speaking. He pops up occasionally on television. Do you believe that Andrew Cuomo, who, by the way, I will concede to you was a very skilled and very tough political operator, do you think there is a path back for him?
There is a path, Roger, and I think what you're asking is very important, but it's a difficult one. Governors, not just in New York, but around the country, are most successful when they're almost imperial, when they force things to happen. And there are many, many, many examples we can cite historically where that's the case. If you look at New York itself for a moment, coming back to the question, governors that have been successful have all told the legislature to take a hike, done what they wanted. George Pataki was very successful. Andrew Cuomo was successful. Hugh Carey was imperial. He said, look, New York City and New York State, get in line. We're bringing in the bankers to fix the problem. Or when the city and the state went bankrupt in 1975, and on and on and on. So more successful governors are much more imperial. Andrew Cuomo was. Can he win again? They want Andrew Cuomo without the Andrew. In other words, they want the Cuomo to straighten the mess out. That's what they're going to want come 2026. The issue for a governor like him is how do you deal with the women issue? And that's very significant, and it's hard to figure that one out. I think that it's very difficult to surmount. But the management issues that the state is experiencing and states throughout the country are going to experience from a financial and the chaotic perspective, every time the progressives take more ground, they make things worse for the electorate. It's a place where Andrew Cuomo could actually do well. How do you deal with the women issue? Not sure. If he can figure that out, he has a key to success.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show on WABC Radio. We are at 770 on the AM dial. You can also hear us at WABCradio.com. So go to your cell phone right now, call a friend or text a friend, family member, someone you like who loves politics and good political discourse, and tell them to tune in, and remind them that we're here every Sunday from 3 to 5 in the afternoon on the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Hank Sheinkopf, one of the most respected Democratic political strategists in the country. I challenge you this. Go do a Google News search on Hank Sheinkopf or Henry Hank Sheinkopf, and you will see that he is, without any question, one of the most quoted men in American politics. He is a go-to guy for every political reporter nationally, state, and locally who wants the straight story about what is going on. And I am very, very honored to have him on the show today. Hank, stories in the New York Times this week saying that progressives who seem to have made great strides within the Democratic Party have begun quiet discussions about recruiting a candidate to oppose current New York City Mayor Eric Adams. A two-part question. One, are the immigration policies of a Democrat president potentially destroying the ability of a Democrat governor to get reelected? And secondarily, does Eric Adams actually, in your opinion, have any vulnerability in the Democratic primary?
I think that the Democratic president is destroying the Democratic mayor, unquestionably. That the blaming of Washington for New York City's problems can only go so far. What they've done is they've given Adams a respite from what he inherited, which was a complete disaster from a budget and management standpoint of the city of the largest city in the nation, all done by a progressive named Bill de Blasio. Crime was up when Adams took over. Agencies were unmanageable. He has the long-term budget problems that de Blasio created. The capital budget which you would use to do infrastructure improvements was empty. I mean, so Adams inherited all this. Now he's got the migrants, and he's got crime problems, whether they're real or not, they're perceived that way. And he's got management issues, and he's still got budget problems, and it's all collapsing on him. Can he be beaten? The idiocy is that you can beat him from the left. If a left candidate runs and Adams runs in a primary, and there's a guy from the center or a woman from the center with real money who could make an argument about managing the city and turning it into a place where you can create jobs and reposition the economy, get rid of the politics and proceed corruption, which is going to have to be part of the argument, and make the police department function better, or the entire criminal justice system, that person has a shot. But you need a three-way primary to do that.
So there's a question I don't know the answer to. The New York State Republican Party is a shadow of its former self. Ed Cox, a good friend of mine who is the returned as state chairman, is doing everything possible to change that. The Republicans ran a surprisingly strong race with Lee Zeldin. I think that had to do more with the unpopularity of the incumbent, Kathy Hochul. Do the Democratic Party organizations, what we used to call the machine, sometimes referred to as Tammany Hall, in this age of mass communications, do they still have any juice? Do they matter?
No, they don't. They can turn out some portion of the electorate, but not with the intensity. Although having a mayor that they can do business with is pretty good because they can get jobs. That means at least they can get job holders to turn out and do work. But campaigns, as a function of the permanent campaign, have become largely entrepreneurial efforts. So Tammany Hall or some relationship to these organizations really doesn't matter. They're essentially job providers for a small group of people and arrangers of interest in the courts and places they do have some control, and the DAs that they do control, district attorneys. So what this has done is kind of upended politics because we don't have a clear sense of what party means anymore, and we don't have clear definition, and we don't have ethnic group allegiance to political parties. It just doesn't work that way.
All right, I'm afraid we have to end it about there. Hank Sheinkopf, without any question, in my opinion, one of the most brilliant Democratic political strategists in the country today, a hard-bitten veteran of over 700 campaigns. If I were a Democrat and I was running for any office at any level, he's the first man that I would call. Hank, we got 1 minute left. I'm going to give you the last word. Roger, it would be better if we were all younger and we could view this through a different prism. But you know what? The system that we participated in is being challenged in ways that may not be solvable, and that is the great fear I have for this most extraordinary nation. May God protect it. Hank, you sent me a text this morning saying getting old is not for the weak. God bless you, my brother, and thank you for joining us on The Roger Stone Show here at WABC Radio.
Oh my God, it's the coolest thing ever. Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? Well, check this out. It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic famous foods from restaurants across the country anywhere nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. Seriously. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The Four Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The Four Seasons, streaming now only on Netflix.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm the host of The Roger Stone Show, none other than Roger Stone. And joining me now is, well, one of my favorite people in the entire world, Kimberly Guilfoyle. You remember Kimberly from Fox Television, but now she is the star of the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show on Rumble, where she is racking up enormous following. I just noticed, Kimberly, that a show we did earlier this week had 245,000 downloads and growing every single day. So you have mastered this new medium, and I'm very grateful that you can join us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Yeah, well, you know, we love when you come on because all of the viewers and the listeners love Roger Stone, just like President Trump does. So it's always a pleasure to be on with you, my friend.
Now, people who don't know you don't know that you are not only an accomplished attorney, but you are also a prosecutor in Los Angeles and in San Francisco, that you had a extraordinary track record of convictions, that you were very famous for giving your summations, which I'm told were legendary, without a single note. So taking off your political hat for a moment and just looking at this as an attorney, what do you think of these recent charges that have been filed by Special Counsel Jack Smith against President Donald Trump in the District of Columbia?
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's a pile-on at this point, Roger. They're just doing anything they can because they're scared to death to be able to go up against this guy at the ballot box. They want to suppress his supporters, his donors, the enthusiasm, the momentum for President Trump and his candidacy. But I think, as you and I have discussed, it really is backfiring in spectacular fashion because Trump is up by 40 points in, many head-to-head contests with, in the primary against all these opponents. He's crushing Ron DeSantis, is way, way in the rearview mirror, choking on Trump's dust, literally. And Ron has only himself to blame for that, of course, in his the leeches that are the political consultants that have been bleeding him dry and giving him bad advice and ruining his political career. But people can be responsible, for their own choices. Meanwhile, Trump is just really crushing it. And I'm telling you, this is not just, the MAGA base, the America First people. This is people who are libertarians, independents, even Democrats that I talk to, as painful as it is to speak to them, they say, this is unbelievable what is happening in this country. And Jack Smith has no credibility whatsoever. We'll be expecting something now, in Georgia, too. We'll just have to wait for something else to come out against, the Bidens. And then, of course, that indictment will drop. It's always just like that. And people see through it. What I think these guys don't get is, as crazed as they are, and really it is true, we always used to talk about years ago, Trump derangement syndrome. They've all got it. And they don't realize that this base strongly supports President Trump, that these witch hunts are appalling, that the public is aghast over what is happening. And these don't have any credibility in and of themselves, factually speaking, legally speaking, but also the fact that they're just piling them on. It's sort of just overkill to the point where you're like, okay, nothing to see here, folks, and just another day, another Tuesday, and another indictment. And that's how it's ending up being. They're trying to just, preoccupy the president, bury him in legal bills and in motion work and in appearances and all of the above to try to, keep him off the trail. But it's just not working. And I think people have really expressed well-deserved disdain for Merrick Garland and for Jack Smith and, for Alvin Bragg and these people that are just, hell-bent with this bloodlust against, President Trump. But I think he's handled it well. And I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this, because the way he's approached it, I think, is very smart in the press, where he has said, look, they're after, me because they're after you, and it is an honor to stand and, take this and push through and persevere because he's doing it for us. And I think that resonates. I think it's good messaging.
I must say, I spoke to him on the phone this morning, and he was cool as a cucumber. I mean, it's just amazing the strength of this guy. A lesser man. Look, I've been in the crosshairs. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And I had some very dark days. Donald Trump doesn't seem to ever get depressed. He doesn't ever seem to. He can get angry because of the injustice of it, but I think that's understandable. But he's amazingly resolute. He's amazingly determined. He's amazingly optimistic. I mean, he's very even-keeled. It's the same Donald Trump that I knew 45 years ago. People say, has he changed? No, he really hasn't changed. He's an optimist. He's a warrior. He's got a great sense of humor. People don't know that. He's also a regular guy. In other words, the one thing Ron DeSantis, our governor here in Florida, and boy, nobody worked harder to put him across than you did, Kimberly. You stumped for that guy. And now he says, he would have won without the support of Donald Trump. That's a fairy tale.
What a bold-faced lie. You know what I can't stand? I can't stand people who just lie outright. The numbers and the polling and where he was going to get smashed, done, forget it, not a chance to win. And Trump stepped in and turned the whole thing around. And we put all our resources, all our time into being in the field with him, to campaign, to raise money, to do everything. And at least be honorable enough to tell the truth and say, yes, I'm very grateful for the support and for all the effort that went behind, my candidacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now he's saying he just did it all his own. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's really, and people who don't live in Florida really don't know the history of this, but Ron DeSantis was a fairly unknown congressman with a fairly indistinguished record. He was at 7% in the polls. The state agriculture commissioner, who was also a popular congressman, Adam Putnam, had the active support of every single one of the 67 county Republican chairmen in the state of Florida. Every single elected Republican in the state House and in the state Senate endorsed Adam Putnam. Every member of the Republican congressional delegation, with the exception of Matt Gaetz, endorsed Adam Putnam. Ron DeSantis was out of money, out of time, out of ideas. What the President Trump has said is absolutely true. Ron came to President Trump with tears in his eyes, begged for an endorsement, and because the president had seen Ron DeSantis on Fox and had heard him on conservative radio defending the president in the Russian collusion hoax, And the president was unaware of the fact that in 2016, that Ron DeSantis declined to even endorse Donald Trump after he was the Republican nominee of the convention. He kept insisting that they were running independently. He never endorsed Trump, but he saw his main chance to elevate his profile. I like the fact that he defended the president on the Russian collusion hoax, but Donald Trump decided to give the guy a chance. It really was like a thermonuclear bomb. I mean, DeSantis's candidacy took off like a rocket. He left Adam Putnam, who's not a bad guy, not an America First Republican, more of an establishment Republican, but he left him in the dust. And then he was locked in an extraordinarily difficult general election. Susie Wiles, who is now chief of staff for President Trump, one of the most capable women in American politics, came in to save Ron DeSantis, took over his general election campaign because Ron had been nominated really as a media phenomena, really solely on the endorsement of Donald Trump. She whipped that campaign into shape, but what really dragged Ron DeSantis over the finish line was the fact that Donald Trump changed his schedule in the last 2 weeks to stage 3 very successful rallies in strategic parts of the state for Ron DeSantis and literally dragged him over the finish line. Also, I think was crucial in the very, very close election of Rick Scott to the U.S. Senate. So people who don't live in Florida, they don't know that story. And early on, when I told people that Governor DeSantis was going to challenge President Trump, people told me that I was being ridiculous. Quit splitting the movement. Why are you dividing us? They said. Well, I'm a pretty shrewd judge of political character, in this case, personal character. If Ron DeSantis had simply waited his turn, he might have had some prospect to be president. I think, and the poll numbers reflect this, if this primary were held in Florida today, in Florida, where both men live, Donald Trump would beat Ron DeSantis by almost 30 points in his home state.
Unbelievable.
It is
unbelievable.
It is counterintuitive here, but it seems to be absolutely true. And Kimberly asked you to comment on this, that every time the president is indicted in one of these, I think, transparently politically motivated, fabricated indictments, he not only gets stronger, but he pulls in tens of thousands, even millions of dollars in small and tiny donations, small and middle-sized donations. Trump's has never, ever, since I have known him and since he got into politics, has never been the toast of the financial elite, never been the toast of Wall Street, never been the toast of the hedge fund managers, never been the candidate of the wealthy globalists, never been the candidate of the Republican establishment. His entire movement, our movement, the movement in which Kimberly Guilfoyle is one of the undisputed and outspoken leaders, the America First movement, is funded by the $100 donations, the $25 donations, the $50 donations. By my calculations, I actually think it is possible, given his reliance on big donors, many of whom are maxed out, and many of whom reportedly have now turned off the spigot, I think Ron DeSantis, at his current burn rate, could be out of money by October 1st. How is the fundraising going for President Trump?
Yeah. So I think that's totally right because just, I used to be the national finance, chair for the president for the campaign. He's burning through money like a bonfire. It's out of control. And somebody said to me just recently, they expect that DeSantis will get out of the race and drop out in October. What do you think?
Well, he's going to be out of cash. I don't know how he backs down when his campaign slogan is never back down, but he's now at the point where he's hurting himself in his home state. He's really limiting his future. Look, this is a pretty big story today, but Laura Loomer discovered that Ron DeSantis sent $1 million to the Speaker of the House for a brand new super PAC that the Speaker formed days after the Florida State Legislature changed the state law, amended state election law, to allow Ron DeSantis to remain in state office, governor, while running for federal office. No other person in the state of Florida can do that. So if I were in the state legislature, let's say, and I wanted to run for Congress, I would have 10 days to resign from my state office before I could launch my federal candidacy. It is very clear to me that this smells to me like a bribe. $1 million, a lot of money, but it came from one of Ron DeSantis' political committees to the Speaker of the Florida House, and it's quid pro quo. I think it smells very bad. The governor's term then here in the state of Florida ends in 2026. He is term limited. He cannot run for a third term. The Florida state constitution does not allow it. There's not a Senate race in this state. There's one this year. Rick Scott is running for re-election. Rick Scott will be re-elected. Rick Scott, in my opinion, would be a great choice to replace Mitch McConnell as Republican leader in the Senate. That would be a great day, wouldn't it?
I'd love that, yeah.
I would too. It's time to ditch Mitch. Boy, President Trump called this one first. Ditch Mitch. Sounds like a bumper sticker to me. It is really, I think, now a situation where Ron will be out of money, and therefore the option of stopping now, warehousing the money that he has in these super PACs, which presumably he still controls, putting it aside and waiting till 2028, I don't even think he can do that. I know a lot of people, a guy you know, I won't say his name, fellow you know, Kimberly, he gave $30,000 to the Friends of Ron DeSantis. He thought he was supporting the governor's re-election to the governorship, as I did. That money went to a super PAC called Friends of Ron DeSantis, which was a state entity. Then the name of that organization was changed to some totally generic name. And then $83 million from that fund was transferred to a super PAC that is designed to oppose Donald Trump and to support Ron DeSantis. Now, my friend in Palm Beach, who's a self-made businessman, retired, living the good life. His wife has some health problems. He's a great guy. He feels like he's been defrauded. He wants his $30,000 back. He's a lover and supporter of President Donald Trump. That's not what he gave Ron DeSantis the money for. And because the Federal Election Commission has a 3-3 split, you can never expect any adjudication of serious legal issues there. Ron may get away with having transferred that money. However, right now they're burning through it. If he were smart, he would drop out now, warehouse that money, which is perfectly legal, and use it for a future presidential campaign. But I think he has turned off so many in the MAGA base that I think he's endangered himself for the long term.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I'm going to tell you something. You know, the new polls came out, and Make America Great Again PAC put out that Ron DeSantis drops to third place, Roger, in national GOP survey. So now he is behind Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, my God. So the writing is on the wall here. He's burning cash. He's losing momentum. He's damaged himself politically. This was not smart at all. He should have just been like gluing himself, Velcroing him to the MAGA magic of Donald Trump and prepared for 2028 to earn that endorsement to be the front runner. He did no such thing. And I think, and President Trump has said to me, that he's going to be too damaged to even run again in 2028. I think if he was smart and he was listening, or if he's listening to this show, he should drop out, like you're saying, take the advice of the great Roger Stone and get it together and try to rebuild reputation and standing and political goodwill and do the right thing.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to do that. I have predicted.
And maybe he has a chance. That's it.
I have predicted on this show, stick to my prediction, that at the end of his term, that Ron DeSantis' wife, Jill Casey DeSantis, will run for governor. I saw someplace this week, I think it was in Politico, where he openly mused about, I don't think she's interested, but if she ever did run, you'd have a very hard time beating her in a Republican primary. To me, that's a tacit admission that this idea is on the drawboards, that I think the governor and his wife have become so addicted to the lifestyle, to the adulation. Look, in 1976, when I was working for Ronald Reagan, I said this elsewhere on the show, when we got low on money, Ronald Reagan and his wife traveled commercial to our rallies. But the DeSantis burned through millions of dollars for private jets when they should have been using that money for voter contact. I saw one of the officials at one of his super PACs say, we have $100 million and we have the best ground game. Ground game? How do you turn out votes for a candidate that many voters have never heard of, and the voters who have heard of him have a mixed review of? So I think he has done extraordinary damage to himself. Kimberly, you were one of the absolute stars at Fox News. That's where I first met you. You're still my favorite there of all time. We still have a few friends inside the building. This upcoming Fox debate, to which all the other Republicans have been invited, and I think they have all accepted. Do you think, just your personal opinion, do you think President Trump has anything to be gained by going to this debate?
Honestly, I really don't. I tend to agree with them. People, and everyone knows Trump isn't a guy who's like afraid or intimidated or scared. He's, a master strategist, and he's got great instincts. Okay. And as you have seen and the world has seen, he's great at these debates. They're unbelievable. The only thing that would be worth watching for Fox is if he, in fact, did debate. Otherwise, that whole thing is just going to be milquetoast and completely boring and ridiculous. So why would he get up there and debate any of these people? So they can try to pile on him or sit one gotcha moment or whatever. No, I don't think there's anything to gain. And no offense, why are we even in this primary? I think it's kind of beneath him, to be honest. He's, the former president of the United States who did a phenomenal job, one of the best presidents we have ever had, ever by far in this country. And I think it's just beneath him. I think operate from a position of strength, let all those guys kill each other, and that's it.
Yeah, I kind of liked his comment that he'd be watching the debate because he considered it like an audition to be
For
vice
VP,
president. Yeah, very,
totally.
very, very clever.
I think that was very clever.
Look, I've
so
argued
good. I think we concur, right?
Yes, I totally agree. With one exception, Chris Christie's at 2% in the polls. I don't really know what he's doing. His entire campaign is based on hate and revenge. He has no plan for America. He couldn't even carry New Jersey today. His poll ratings in New Jersey are horrific. I saw they gave him 35 minutes on CNN the other night, in which all he did was attack Donald Trump and make it very clear that he's prepared to send as many billions more to Ukraine as they want, without any tether on that money. I mean, Rand Paul, who I really admire a lot, sponsors an amendment in the U.S. Senate after they pass these massive billion-dollar payouts to Ukraine for the war effort, asking that they put an inspector general in charge of that money to keep an eye on where it's going, and that's defeated under the leadership of Mitch McConnell. Why would any senator, Republican or Democrat, not want to know where our tax dollars are going, not want to know whether it's being skimmed off the top by crooked Ukrainian politicians, whether some of it's even making its way back to the United States? But Chris Christie, he's all in on the war in Ukraine. He visited Ukraine last week. That explains the food shortages, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, I'm also just very curious to see going forward, who remains to be smart about how they're handling everything with President Trump. I think Vivek, I hear a lot of people really like him and how he's handling it, that he's been very supportive to the president, as well as Tim Scott's been playing it smart. Not Chris Christie.
Yeah, that's just a nasty act of revenge. He's not a serious candidate. 2012 was his year. He took a pass. He then tried to get on the ticket with Mitt Romney. That didn't work. Then he wanted to get on the ticket with Donald Trump. I'd like to remind people, had that happened and the George Washington Bridge scandal broke that October, he would have scuttled the entire ticket. His lawyer in that, by the way, Christopher Wray, your current FBI director, represented Chris Christie in the George Washington Bridge closing scandal. Interesting little factoid there. I'm not even sure why he's running. Tim Scott really has impressed me, I must say. And this has happened traditionally in American politics, people who realize that sometimes you have to run for president more than one time to get nominated. Some realize that you run for president to position yourself for the ticket. And I don't know this to be the case, but if that is what Tim Scott has in mind, I think he's handling himself extraordinarily well.
I think so too, by the way. He's being a class act. People like him. You don't hear anybody trashing or being upset with him. He's not angering the base because Trump's followers and the base, they have a long memory for this. And, people say, oh, well, what percentage of, did you really find out what percentage of the Republican, voters and base is really Trump's base? How would anyone figure that out? I go, what are you talking about? Look at the Republican primary and how many people are voting and supporting Trump in the polls. Like, come on, he's running away with it. That's how many. It's not Mitch McConnell's party, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Tell me your impression of the candidacy of Nikki Haley. It's another one I can't figure out, but maybe you have some insights.
I don't know. She was like the first in to go. I mean, I think no one's even talking about her. I think she's largely, irrelevant. But I will tell you this, President Trump is not picking her.
I would think not.
Yeah, he has no interest in that whatsoever.
Do you have it's very, very early. People ask me this constantly. Who will Trump take for vice president? First of all, implicit in that question is a recognition that Trump will be the Republican nominee. I think that is absolutely true. All he needs is one more indictment and he'll lock it up, because it is counterintuitive. Every time there's more bad news in Biden land, whether it is cocaine found at the White House or evidence of wires directly from the Ukrainian energy company to Joe and Hunter Biden. By the way, Andrea Mitchell of NBC says these are unfounded. Rumors of corruption by the Bidens, that's unfounded. Evidently, she can't read. It's really hard to understand. But it is interesting. It's kind of a tit for tat thing. Every time there is any inkling of new revelations about the epic corruption of the Bidens, we're talking about extortion. We're talking about bribery. We're talking about money laundering. We're talking about influence peddling. We're talking about multi-million-dollar payments from Ukraine, from China, from Russia, from Romania. Every time there is new breaking news, well, don't look over there, folks. Look over here. It's a new indictment of Donald Trump. I've looked extensively at this Georgia phone call. I've listened to the entire audio. I've read the entire transcript. It's tedious, by the way. It is absolutely clear that Donald Trump did nothing whatsoever wrong. He didn't tell the Secretary of State to go out and find or manufacture, 11,870 ballots, I think it is. He told the Secretary of State, you have already inadvertently counted that number of illegal ballots. And he breaks it down. Convicted felons, people who are deceased, people who are no longer live in the state. But they have bastardized this. They have misrepresented it to the American people. I think that which does not kill Donald Trump merely makes him stronger.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And I think if they're being honest, they didn't know that it would have these unintended consequences that have actually just served to propel his candidacy, his policies, the momentum, the enthusiasm. And they weren't counting on this. And like you and I have discussed before, their plan was, okay, let's go ahead and do this and we'll jump in. I think DeSantis thought that's what he was going to do and that Trump was going to get crippled by legal problems, lawfare, indictments, the globalists and the uniparty to the point where he was going to have to drop out or that his numbers would fall dramatically. None of that has happened. So break all your big plans, folks, because it backfired.
All right, we're out of time. Kimberly, tell people where folks can see the Kimberly Guilfoyle show every day.
All right, so you can see my show, download the Rumble app, and subscribe to my channel and to my friend Roger Stone and my sweetheart Donald Trump Jr. I am on every Monday and Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern live, and it's a great show. Make sure you do it. Check it out and tell your friends about it. We have fabulous guests like the one and only, the greatest, Roger Stone on there, and you'll learn a lot. You'll get the inside stuff because you're not going to get it from the mainstream media, that's for sure, but we'll tell you the truth and give you the facts.
All right, this has been the Roger Stone, Kimberly Guilfoyle Mutual Admiration Society meeting. Kimberly Guilfoyle, thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show here at WABC Radio.
My pleasure. You're the best.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
This is Roger Stone. Well, I'm a man who's been through the Washington, D.C. meat grinder. And now I see the exact same thing that happened to me happening to Donald Trump. It's like deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra used to say. And it's a carbon copy. Nowhere in the law does it say when you are charged with a crime, justly or unjustly, but when you are charged with a crime, do you forfeit your First Amendment rights to free speech? Nowhere does it say that you lose your ability to defend yourself. Now, in my case, the judge slapped me with a gag order because she said my public defense of myself against the onslaught of CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the dominant Washington Post in the District of Columbia, that would taint the jury pool. What could taint the jury pool any more than the relentless attacks of the Washington Post? But the fact that that's not true is demonstrated by the fact that the judge not only kept the gag order on me during my trial, but even after I was convicted and awaiting sentencing, long after the jury had been dismissed, right up until the time that President Donald Trump commuted my sentence, the gag order was in place. So I couldn't go on WABC radio, I couldn't go on television, I couldn't go on Fox, I couldn't go on the internet to defend myself. You see, what they want to do here is they want to gag you and then they want to lynch you. Well, Special Counsel Jack Smith filed a protective order this past week when President Donald Trump said on Truth Social, if they come after me, I'm going to come after them. Put that in the context of a presidential campaign. It was bad enough that I was gagged, but I wasn't running for president of the United States. So the real irony here is they're accusing Donald Trump, they've actually charged him with election interference when what we see happening before our very eyes is the election interference. Whether they're successfully able to gag him really remains to be seen. And then we found out today that Twitter was subpoenaed by Jack Smith for all of Donald Trump's Twitter files. Well, all of his tweets can be seen online, even though he himself has not begun posting at his Twitter profile. He's able to if he wants to. I'm among those who have urged him to return to Twitter from time to time. He still has, I think, 81 million followers on Twitter. But this was resisted. and Twitter did not want to turn that over. They were fined $350,000. They appealed the order to turn over their records. The Court of Appeals in D.C., 2 judges appointed by Barack Obama and 1 judge appointed by Joe Biden upheld the order, and Twitter was forced to hand over Donald Trump's Twitter records. Here's the cropper. They said that it was vital that Trump not know of their request for his Twitter records because it would make the president a flight risk. Does anyone really think that Donald Trump is going to leave the country in the middle of a successful presidential campaign? Look, we can go to the bottom line of this very easily. If he wasn't leading the Republican field by almost 40 points, if he wasn't leading Joe Biden in virtually every national poll and in the swing states, there would be no persecution. If you ask me, you can call all of this witch hunt number 4. This is the Roger Stone Show.